Hello everybody and welcome into a very special new video series on the Dog Nation video channels, which we call DGD. My name is Brandon Adams, and of course, if you're a longtime Georgia fan, you know what DGD means, dang good dog, or you can insert whatever word you want to in there. A celebration of the best that has come through the University of Georgia, both on the field and in life, around football and after football, and certainly our guest here today is a full embodiment of that. A record-setting wide receiver of the Georgia Bulldogs and a longtime veteran of the Canadian Football League and a terrific analyst coaching football and talking about football now. It's a good friend of Dog Nation and a great way to start our brand new DGD series. It's the former Georgia wide receiver, Terrence Edwards. Terrence, thank you so much for being a part of our Dog Nation video show here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love coming here with you guys, Brandon.
Well, I love having you here too. And over the course of our conversation here today, we're going to get a chance to hear from Terrence about his thoughts on the current Georgia team and maybe that next generation of great wide receiver, the 2020 class and beyond. Terrence, of course, knows a lot of these guys because of the individual work that he does as a coach. But one of the things that we hope to be able to do as part of the DGD series is give you an idea of the person behind the player. You know, I grew up watching football on TV, sit in the stands at Sanford Stadium, and we don't see your face during the game. We see the number on the back of your jersey. You're covered up by a helmet, and for most people, it becomes hard to imagine that the guy that you actually see on the field or the guy that's sitting next to me right now is a real person away from the gridiron. So to help people kind of get acquainted with all of that, Terrence is more than just a former wide receiver. He's more than just a wide receivers coach now. He's more than just a football analyst. This is a guy that's left the game of football and gone on to have a great family life. In fact, let's get you a little bit more acquainted with exactly who Terrence Edwards is here. He's got a wife, Candace. You and your wife recently celebrated your 10th wedding anniversary. And look at this great-looking family here, and how much do you love the Georgia red and black here. Your son, Terrence II, Troy, who's 8 years old, and your daughter, Cadence, who's 2 years old. There's a great photo with the coach that you played for, the former Georgia coach, Mark Richt. And of course, you live in Atlanta. You own and operate the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. And I guess seeing all these photos and knowing your career the way that I do you ever have to remind your kids of, hey, I played this game, right? Like, you know, obviously they know you post-football career, but do they ever have a hard time understanding that one time their daddy was actually out there on that football field doing the things we watch these Georgia guys doing now?
You know, my kids actually watch all my videos, so they have watched them to death, so they understand that Dad was a pretty good football player, so they was up in Canada with me, so they got to experience that as well.
Now, I would imagine when it comes to these sons especially, that wide receiver technique, those backyard football games, probably take on a whole different dimension when you're running those backyard routes and all of a sudden the daddy is also a wide receivers coach. There's a lot more body control and footwork that probably gets talked about in instances like that.
You know, the trainer and the dad are two different people, so once we're in the backyard, just playing around, the trainer comes out in me, but then Dad comes out when they don't do it like I want them to do it. Then Dad comes out, but they love doing it. They love going to training with me as well.
I mentioned the fact that Terrence Edwards is a great trainer of wide receivers. In fact, he runs Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. We'll give you some details about that so you can understand a bit about what he does. It's located in the Atlanta area. You work with a lot of wide receivers, a lot of the famous names that we know, including Malcolm Mitchell, who just ended his football career recently. But folks can actually contact you if they want to be a part of that, is that right? Well,
yes, sir. Yes, sir. So they could reach me on all social media at TE, that's Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy on Instagram and Twitter. And
then obviously we have a lot of younger people who may not remember Terrence from way back when he played at Georgia in the late 90s and early 2000s. But Terrence was a guy that put together a terrific career at Georgia. In fact, some of the records that you set still stand to this day right now. When you look at the numbers, they are certainly phenomenal, whether it be the most touchdowns in a career, most receiving yards in a career, most career receptions, and I think this is, of all that, maybe the most interesting thing, the only Georgia wide receiver to have more than 1,000 yards in a single season, going back to the SEC championship year of 2002. Now, Terrence, you're a humble guy. I know you don't like talking about yourself a ton. You like talking about other football players more than you like talking about yourself. But when you look at that back of the football card, so to speak, I know it must feel good to know that those are significant accomplishments. So when you look back on your Georgia years, I'm sure you must look back on them fondly.
I do. You know, those are numbers that have stood for 17 years now. I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud that I was able to go and fulfill what I set out to do when I first went to Georgia, to be the best player that I could be and be the best at the position that I was going to play. So those numbers are good numbers, and I'm proud to say that I still own them.
So over the course of our conversation here on our DGD series on the Dog Nation video channels, you're going to have a chance to talk to Terrence yourself. If you're watching right now via YouTube or Facebook or any of our other video platforms, go ahead and get your question in. We'll have a chance to answer and communicate about some of those over the course of our program here this afternoon. But to set all that up before we find out more from Terrence and learn more about him and from him, let's take a moment to see how much you already know. Now, one of the things we like to do on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger every Wednesday, Jeff Sintel has his weekly six-pack. He throws at the trivia questions. For those of you that watch, I frequently get these wrong. Today, though, there is no Jeff. It's just Terrence and me sitting in here. So I have a chance to be the inquisitor today. I have the chance to be the one asking the questions. So I'm going to throw these out here. Now, Terrence, presumably you already know these answers because these are all about you. So we'll take a second to find out from our audience just how much they know about the great former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards, who's here with us right now. And then we'll talk some more Georgia football with Terrence over the course of the program here as well. So here we go. Here is question number one. Many of you are aware that Terrence and his brother Robert, a terrific former running back at UGA, were a sibling tandem that played at Georgia. So along those lines, which UGA player did not also have a brother that played football for the Bulldogs? Is it former quarterback Aaron Murray, former offensive lineman John Theus? Terrence Edwards is on this list. I guess I partially just gave that one away. Or is it current UGA safety J.R. Reed? So go ahead and get your answer in. Shane Bentley in our YouTube comment section, he thinks he knows the answer. Tramel White also on YouTube thinks he knows the answer. Devin Campbell says Aaron Murray. We'll find out the answer here in just a moment as these answers continue to flood in. Willie Gray's also got a great question that we'll talk to Terrence about in just a moment. Zach Smith also says Aaron Murray as well. So without further ado, let's find out what the correct answer is. Is it Murray or is it J.R. Reed? No, it is J.R. Reed, whose cousin D'Angelo Gibbs was a part of the Georgia roster in 2017-2018, but is now transferred to Tennessee. Aaron Murray's brother Josh, who I guess became more famous for being a part of The Bachelor, the name of that show, was also on the Georgia roster at one point in time. So, I mean, how much fun is it for you to know that your legacy at Georgia is not just something that you have to yourself, but it is something that you share with Robert? And I say this all the time. When you go back and look at those YouTube videos of great Georgia highlights, and I'm not just saying this because you're sitting here, because you know I've said this a million times, the Robert Edwards highlights at running back, I think, are as much fun as any back who's come through Georgia. If Robert doesn't hurt his knee after his rookie season with the Patriots, this is a long NFL career. Yeah. How much fun is that for you to share that legacy with your brother there at UGA?
It's fun. You know, I talk to him every day, and what I always said that I think Robert is the best athlete that we've ever had at running back. And that don't mean he's the best running back, but he's the best athlete. You know, name another guy that was all SEC cornerback and then all SEC running back. Yeah. So I just think he's the best athlete we've had at running back in Georgia history.
I'm correct in saying this, correct? His first game starting at tailback, five touchdowns
against South Carolina.
So keeping that theme going with he and Robert, let's move on to question number two here. As we said before, Robert did play at UGA. So who is older? Now, if you lived through this era, you know this. Is it Robert, Terrence, or they are twins? We'll let some of you guys weigh in on this. Is it Robert, Terrence? Who's the older of the two here? By the way, Stacey Goebel also mentioned when it comes to great siblings at Georgia, you can talk Bailey brothers there as well, and that is certainly true. Thomas Martin says it's great to see a lot of real UGA fans on here. No doubt real UGA fans will appreciate the fact that the older of the two is Robert. Robert is 5 years older.
5 years.
5 years older than you were.
And
that's one of the things too. When you came into UGA, you kind of already had a good level of fame about you because that Edwards name did carry a lot of weight. And I guess to a certain extent, it's kind of nice to arrive on campus with fans already knowing who you are. But there's also this thing of how good's Terrence Edwards going to be, because we know how good Robert was. How good is Terrence going to be? A little extra pressure involved.
It's a blessing and a curse. You know, it's a great to follow in the footsteps of your brother who's had such a great career. But then people put expectations on you that you got to come up and live. And I said this earlier once I was at Georgia. I had to come in and live up to the Edwards name.
Sure.
And I came in and just showed my God-given talent, and luckily both of us had great careers at Georgia.
All right, question number three. Speaking of the brother Robert, which of these two had the fastest clocked 40 time? Now, I don't know if these are laser times or these are stopwatch times, but who of these two had the fastest of the two 40 times? Would you like to tell us the answer to that one?
Robert.
Yeah, it's not, listen, wide receivers don't like admitting anybody had the faster 40 time.
Robert.
But I guess just a couple of hundredths of a second, right? 4.38 to
Yeah.
4.43. You know, this is the time of year we see a lot of receivers trying to run that 40 time and impressing those NFL scouts. You work with the receivers now. When it comes to that straight line speed, how important is that really? I mean, we can see examples of guys who've become great without having that. How much does a 40 time really matter? Obviously, at your position, we do a lot of judging on that. But is it really that crucial?
It's not. It's not. It can get you paid. You go out and look at DJ Metcalf from Ole Miss, go out and run a fast 40 time. But it's always about technique and technician. I could think of Hines Ward right now. Hines Ward probably was a 4.7, 4.8 guy that I know personally, and another guy, Anquan Bolden, is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Ran a 4.8. And both of those in their careers were over 1,000 yards, 1,000 catches.
Yeah,
and so
that's quite a career.
Yeah, straight line speed is good to have.
Yeah.
Look at Tyreek Hill, but it's not It's not the greatest assets you have, because it doesn't matter how fast you are. If you can't catch or get in and out of breaks, it doesn't matter.
So I learned something new about you in preparing for this show that I didn't realize. The subject of question number 4, as we learn more about Terrence Edwards during our DGD series on the Dog Nation video channels. It's great to have you with us. Don't forget to have your questions for Terrence in the comments section. We'll read some of those coming up. So as far as your roommate goes, the University of Georgia, this is a pretty interesting guess to make here. You've got Boss Bailey, the terrific former linebacker, Randy McMichael, former Georgia tight end, longtime NFL veteran, the pride of Buford, Georgia, Tim Wansley, former quarterback Quincy Carter, former running back Jasper Sanks. Now, if I was guessing on this, I'm not sure which one I would have guessed, but I'll let other people kind of get their own guesses in here in a moment. By the way, Stephen Brock agrees that Terrence is truly a DGD. There's no doubt about that. Shane Bentley says, was it Quincy Carter that you were roomed with? Tremel White says it was Randy McMichael. Stacy Goebel also says Quincy Carter. The answer, though, is not Shane and Stacy. It's actually Tremel, right? Tremel's getting this one right. It was Randy McMichael, correct?
Randy McMichael.
So we know Randy a bit around here, and Randy's got quite a personality. My guess is living with him back in those early days of your UGA career was probably a pretty interesting experience.
The best roommate I've ever had in my life. I mean, he's a fun, we all know his personality, very upbeat, but he was the best roommate I could have in college.
He also put something on Twitter the other day that I didn't realize, that, you know, when he's coming to Georgia kind of late 90s, the recruiting talk is not quite as developed and I guess thorough as it is now. But Randy said Georgia was the only offer he had. Now, this is the guy that played in the NFL for a long time.
10 years.
He said on Twitter this week that the only offer he had from anybody was UGA. Now imagine that for a guy that turned out to be as good as he was.
Yes, that's how we know the recruiting process is not,
always perfect. Yeah,
exact science.
Yeah,
you know.
it can be a little flawed from time to time.
Most definitely.
Certainly, Randy's proof of that. All right, one more trivia question to get to here, and this is an interesting one because after setting a record, setting career and record-breaking career at UGA, you move on to the professional phase. Which NFL team did Terrence Edwards make as an undrafted free agent? Is it Atlanta? Is it Jacksonville? Is it Houston? Is it Cleveland? We'll get some answers in on that. Let some folks have their chance to weigh in about which team you made as an undrafted free agent. People are weighing in. And Terrence, would you like to tell us the answer?
Atlanta Falcons.
The Atlanta Falcons. So you make the Falcons roster, and then you go on to a long-time career playing in the CFL. I've never been to Canada. At least, I mean, I've seen Canada across the border, but I've never actually been to Canada. What kind of culture shock experience was that to play north of the border that way?
You know, give you a little background. You know, I played my whole career before I went to Canada in the state of Georgia. Born and raised in the state of Georgia.
That's a really good point.
Played Georgia Bulldogs, played Atlanta Falcons. So I really haven't even been outside the state, let alone been outside the country. So I had no idea, had know nothing about Canada. I thought it was all ice, and they lived in igloos and had penguins as pets.
Yeah.
But it's that's exactly what I saw in books. So
yeah.
It is a beautiful country. I mean, you go in there in the summertime,
Sure.
it is beautiful. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. The culture is a little different, but
the rules are different.
The rules are different.
Three downs, is that right?
3 downs,
120-yard field.
120-yard, 12 men on the field. So there's a lot of rules that are very different than American football, but at the end of the day, it's football. It's something I love to do, and I had a great time up there.
Getting paid in Canadian dollars probably not as much fun as getting paid in American dollars.
It's not, because then there's a conversion rate where you lose a little bit on top of your money. But, you know, my family got an opportunity to live in a different country for 6 months out of the year. My kids still remember those days.
What a great story, Terrence. Thanks so much for sharing that. Willie Gray in our Facebook comment section a little earlier asked about why it is that Georgia has not been able to produce a 1,000-yard receiver since Terrence was on campus at UGA, and I guess kind of along those lines. when you look at this current crop of receivers, whether it be eclipsing that single season total of 1,000 yards or one day putting together the kind of career that you put together, do you see anybody on the horizon right now for Georgia capable of doing something like that?
On the roster right now, it just depends on what type of scheme we're going to run. If we're going to consistently have 2,000-yard backs, then I don't see, doesn't matter talent level, us having a 1,000-yard receiver. But if we go to the of having an offense that throws the ball a little bit more, then we have a couple of guys on the roster that we can I see can have 1,000 yards. Demetrius Roberts is a guy I think can have a 1,000-yard season.
By the way, Crow King 123 says that Penguins would be the best pets. All of a sudden, you got to get a little jealous. He's like, if I can go to Canada and get a Penguin as a pet, he might like that. Demetrius Roberts is also a name that comes up in our conversation a lot, and just the idea of having more productivity from the Georgia receivers. We all obviously love the running game that Georgia's put together, but how important is adding that extra dimension to the passing game to fully complement this offense? When you look at that, how important is that?
It's very important. I mean, you cannot beat Alabama on a consistent basis running the ball. Their defensive scheme and their players is just too good. So we're going to have to be two-dimensional. We're going to have to be able to have a potent passing attack along with a potent running game to beat them. We just can't be one-dimensional either way. Nick Saban's too good to do that to the Alabama team.
So when I look back on your Georgia career, I know what comes to my mind as the memory that stands out over any other. When you look back on those 4 years at UGA, when you smile and think about that time, what stands out more than anything else?
Oh, winning the SEC championship in 2002. Breaking that perceived curse for 20 years that we couldn't get over that hump, and that senior class with John Stinchcomb, Boss Bailey, Tony Gilbert. That's the 2002 SEC championship season.
I think one of the things that if you didn't live through that as a fan the way that I did, I think it's hard to go back and put into words. I know as a player you felt this, the thirst to be in that game. SEC championship game had been around since the early 90s. As of 2002, Georgia had never made it. Tennessee and Florida had represented the East every year up to that point in time. There was this intense restlessness on the part of Georgia fans to break through on that. And that moment stands, even with what Kirby Smart's been able to accomplish and what Dooley accomplished before Rick, that 2002 SEC championship, I believe, still has an incredibly special place in Georgia football history just because of the build-up to actually getting into that game that was basically right next to the Athens campus, but Georgia hadn't found a way to kick the door in on it.
I think that season and what that thing is, it lifted the rooftop off our program. I mean, it got to the point where we just thought about going. We didn't think about it anymore. We had the players and the talent and the coaching staff to make that our second home, man. Right now, that's what we're doing.
Now, and obviously, this age of college football, an SEC champion punches his ticket usually to the college football playoff. In 2002, we're pre-playoff, but there's no doubt one loss. Georgia compared pretty favorably to Miami and Ohio State and the best team in the sport of that year. Had there been a college football playoff, I'm assuming you think that Georgia would have been in it. And how do you think the Dogs could have done had your team from that year been able to actually be a part of what we have now in the sport, which is a college football playoff?
I think we fit the bill. We had a great defense led by Tony Gilbert, Boss Bader, David Pollard, and offensively we were very balanced. We had a great running back in Musa Smith. We had Ben Watson at tight end, and our receiving corps, I think, is the best receiving corps overall that we had in Georgia history, in my opinion. So you couldn't just focus on me because you had Fred Gintz with Damian Gary, Michael Johnson as well, that, we had the talent to win it. We didn't finish the dress, we say, in that Florida game, but we had the team to, if there was a 14 playoff, I think we had a legit chance of winning.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And as far as your favorite individual memory goes, obviously a great celebration for the team, but individually, anything that stands out to you more so than anything else?
It's probably, it's not even the numbers that I put up. It's just the one thing that, the drop pass against Florida is one of the things that did bother me for a long time. I must say that, but it doesn't anymore. But that's one of the things that, I play back in my head, what could I have done better?
Sure.
What should I have done from a technique standpoint? But that play lives on to this day, and a lot of people still like to talk about it, but I will talk about it with them because to now I've done the great things. I'm a loving father, great husband, great coach, great mentor, teaching these young kids the proper way to play. So that play don't define me as a player. So that one of the plays that I go back and look at it, like what I should have done. Now I'm teaching players what not to do in games.
So if you don't know what Terrence is referencing, it's talking about a drop pass that could have gone for a touchdown. The 2002 game against Florida, you're obviously a great competitor, so that's going to bother you more than it could bother anybody else because of how hard you competed. And you mentioned the fact that people still bring it up. The other thing that, as a fan myself, that I hope that you'd be aware of is the overwhelming level of support that I saw for you in the aftermath of that moment. Because, listen, Georgia's not getting to the SEC, and I know you know this, but Georgia's not getting to the SEC Championship 2002 without the contribution that you made. And having sat in the stands in Jacksonville that day and heard from a lot of Georgia fans after the fact, that's one thing that I think, from my experiences, a lot of Georgia fans were very much aware of, that your contribution to Georgia completely outweighed that one individual moment. And whether it be you in 2002 or current players on this team right now, obviously players are going to be aware of the criticism that's out there and the things that are being said. But I would hope that you were also aware of the love and support that you got from what I think was a much larger pocket of Georgia fans.
Most definitely. You know, one of the biggest things that I got was a voice call from someone. It wasn't very nice, and that probably was the lowest. But the highest is the fan support that I got from everyone. I have a billboard. It was a billboard put up in my hometown right after that, just to show them the support. I mean, a lot of people don't know that my mother had to go to the hospital right after that game, so I got dressed quickly and went to the hospital. Coach Rick, them, you know, they waited on me from the plane, but a lot of people don't know that. So that happened because, like, this is just a game. You know, if people want to get upset about a play, this is a game. There's bigger issues in life that my mother had to go to the hospital that night, which everything checked out to be all right. But you want to get upset about a game and leave me a voicemail on my voice message. But I just appreciate all the tons of true Georgia fans that came out and supported me, asked about my mom, and put that billboard up in my hometown.
That's an amazing story. I appreciate you sharing that. It's also worth pointing out, on the other end of the spectrum when it comes to great rivalry performances, a big touchdown against Georgia Tech. I know that's a fond memory for you as well.
It was a now this is going to kill you. So the play that I dropped against Florida and the great play that I called against Georgia Tech when I had to kind of block the ball away from the defender and I dove for it was the exact same play. Was the exact same play.
It is funny how that works out from time to time, right? You probably practiced that a million times, and just listen, on the field, anything can happen. When you look back at some of the wide receivers that you played with, you obviously played for some really great guys. Is there one that maybe didn't make the NFL, or maybe a lot of younger fans may not know as much about, that you think ought to be remembered, and Georgia fans, a name they ought to know back from that era? People obviously know a good bit about you. Another receiver that people ought to still remember from that era?
I'm telling you, probably the most talented guy that was in that room was Fred Gibson. You know, big, long basketball player. We call him Deep Ball Freddie because he had the unique ability to catch deep balls, and we don't know how you call it, you know, i.e. the Alabama game where he was falling back and he caught the touchdown. He had the great ability to just go and get it. And just his skill set, I thought would translate to the NFL. For whatever reason, it didn't. You know, I still talk to Fred all the time, a good person, good friend. But I thought he would go in and have a very long, productive career.
There are two games from Fred Gibson's career that I think people should acquaint themselves with if they don't know much about Gibson. One was from his freshman season 2001 at Tennessee. I know you remember that game. And another game, this is after your career was done. Do you remember the 2004 game against LSU when LSU in Athens had those two great NFL cornerbacks, and Gibson and Reggie Brown both that day had huge games. Those are the two games that come to my mind when I think about Fred Gibson. And then, you know, on the other side of the ball, I know sometimes you're probably impressed with guys who, listen, when they come in, maybe they don't look the tallest, maybe they don't seem the biggest, and then they go on to have maybe better careers than you expected. Anybody that comes to mind for you in that regard?
Man, my main man, Tim Jennings. Man, Tim Jennings was a guy that was going to South Carolina State, if I'm not mistaken. I think Coach Garner, Rodney Garner, saw Tim Jennings at the Shrine Bowl and offered him a scholarship on the spot. And you think about all the guys that was projected to rank, that was ranked higher than him in the projections. Tim Jennings come in as a 2-star, probably no stars, end up a 10-year
right?
career.
It's amazing.
I mean, and he had all the tools. I mean, he was fast, was skilled, just a good person.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, is a good person, still is to this day.
All right, if you have a question you want to ask for Terrence Edwards as part of our DGD video series, we'd love to have you get your comments in on the Dog Nation Facebook or the YouTube page, Dog Nation on Twitter as well. We'll read some of those. Before we're done, Terrence will give us some thoughts on his top targets to watch for at the wide receiver position for the class of 2020. We'll look forward to doing that. I also want to get some more thoughts from you about what's currently going on at UGA. We'll mix in some comments on this as well. We're about to see this upcoming April. There is a chance, at least a possibility, that Riley Ridley, the former Georgia receiver, could be drafted in the first round. There's, depending on where you look, which mock draft you pay attention to, it kind of teeters back and forth between, I think, the first and second round. But this is a guy that never really had big stats at Georgia, never had a 600-yard receiving season. It's unusual for someone who has used that lightly to be drafted as highly as Ridley may be drafted. First of all, do you see first-round talent when you look at Ridley? And I guess, second of all, what do you make of Georgia and the fact that it had some of these receivers this past year, but maybe from a statistical standpoint didn't use them as much as some fans probably thought they should have?
Yeah, Riley is a guy that I really like. He's a pure wide receiver. What I mean by pure wide receiver is he has the hands, he has the route running ability, he has the IQ to get in and out of breaks, he has the IQ to find holes in his zone. So talent-wise, he definitely should be considered to be a first-round wide receiver. And I think a lot of people, talk about stats. Stats shouldn't be the thing that gets you drafted. It's your future position for us being able to lead a team. He can do that. He can go out and be a game breaker. He just didn't get that many opportunities at Georgia to be that guy. And I was impressed from Riley from the national championship game on to now. He's been a #1 receiver for Georgia, and he has the potential to be in the NFL.
Nice comment from Johnny Prescott, who says, "Thanks for sharing your memories, Terrence. I think about you and your brother every time I drive through Tennell. It's great to be a Georgia Bulldog, and you are a great one, no doubt." So a very nice comment, Johnny. We appreciate that. And then, to kind of get back to what receivers on the field this season, we had a good question earlier from Jacob McMillan, who says, pound for pound, which current UGA wide receiver is the best? And I guess I'll kind of also add to that, when you look at those three guys that could be on the field, assuming Georgia's in a three-receiver set to start the 2019 season, which guys come to mind for you as, I guess, most competitive to fill those spots, or maybe the guy that stands head and shoulders over the rest?
Jeremiah Holloman is the guy that's probably the most experience we got going coming back right now. He's going to be that alpha dog out there leading the guys. Tyler Simmons is another guy that brings a unique skill set to the position, with being a 6 feet, 210 pounds, but he's a blazing fast guy, so he's been able to take the top off defense. Demetrius Robinson is another guy that's probably going to get some looks in the slot as well, but he's another guy that's straight line fast, that be able to lift top off defense. And Trey Blunt's another physical receiver that's going to have his opportunities to prove to the coach that he should be on the field in the fall.
Yeah, I love Trey's comment that he made to us at Marlowe's event a couple of years ago before he signed at Georgia, saying that he knew at UGA you had to block to get the rock, and he's shown that level of physicality that's smart, and Cortez Hankton, James Coley appreciate. You hope he gets a chance to be rewarded on this. I'll get back to the current UGA talk in a moment, but James Bryant in our Facebook comment section also had a great question. He said, of the Georgia quarterbacks that you've seen since your career ended with David Green, is there one that you would have liked to have caught some passes from? You obviously had a great chemistry with David Green, but is there a Georgia quarterback since then that you would have liked to have throwing you the football?
I like Aaron Murray.
Yeah,
I really do. I thought Aaron.
He certainly threw plenty of touchdowns.
He did. He threw. He gave. I wouldn't call him having the strongest arm. Him and David Green to me was very similar. They threw very catchable balls, and what I mean by that is they didn't have the rocket arm like DJ or Eason, but they threw catchable balls in spots that kept receivers running. Aaron Murray back shoulder fade is probably one of the best I've seen in the Georgia uniform. So Aaron Murray is probably the guy I would love to catch passes from.
You mentioned Demetrius Robertson's name a moment ago, and that's a guy that Georgia fans talk about a lot. Is this a year that a light comes on for him? Where do you see, I guess, opportunity for improvement, areas where you expect him to take a step forward from really not seeing a ton of him on the field a year ago?
I just think the confidence-wise is one thing that he's going to take, because now he knows those three guys that was in hell of it are gone now. So now it's his team to step up for him to be able to live up to the expectation that we all have put on him right now. So I think he's just confident. I think he got into the weight room. Coach Aiton Clare has done a great job of redefining his body strength-wise. I think he really found out that the football that they play out west and the football they play here is totally two different footballs.
I thought Howard Eubanks in our YouTube comment section had a great question. You know, we heard last week from McCole Hardman saying, I learned the position, how to play wide receiver from Terry Godwin. Godwin said last week, well, I learned the position from Malcolm Mitchell, who famously just retired from the New England Patriots, or from the NFL and football in general, just this past week. It's almost like a baton's been passed from one receiver to the next, and you were part of that lineage yourself. When you look at Roberts needing to learn more about what the SEC is about, as Howard asked in the comment section, is there a leader that can help do that? Is there a receiver that you see now or you know about from this roster that can help teach Robertson what he still needs to know about finally getting on the field and being productive? Do you see a leader in that wide receiver room?
I do. The transfer from Miami is a guy that's played a lot of football. And I think he is a guy that could take a lot of these young guys up under his wing and tutor them of how to play big-time wide receiver in the big-time conference. So I think those are two things that he's bringing to his leadership and understanding the position, because he's played a lot of football. So that's going to be big for him to take these guys up under his wing. Even though he's new to the program, he's not new to the position and playing big-time football.
Let me talk to you real quickly about a couple of the newcomers to the Georgia wide receiver room. We've heard you talk about Dominic Blaylock before, so let me start with a guy that, for a lot of Georgia fans, there is a good bit of excitement about, and that's George Pickens, the five-star coming over from the state of Alabama, arriving on campus. Hopefully everything works out for him to be here this summer. It seems like we're heading in a positive direction on that. The game film seems to speak for itself. This looks like the kind of guy that would potentially have all the tools. But when you see Pickens, what do you see when you look at George?
I see a number one wide receiver. I see a guy that can put a team on his back when we need to play. If it's a screen, intermediate play, taking an option route, or a deep pass, when we need to play in a crucial down, I see a guy that be able to be physical enough to take the abuse from SEC defense along and making plays at the same time. That don't come along very often. So I think he's a guy that could be the next guy that could be a 1,000-yard receiver. He has the tools to do that. I don't know if he would, but I don't know if we're going to throw that much. But he has the tools to be the next receiver to come out of the University of Georgia.
When you have that potential level of explosiveness, how much easier does it make for the other receivers and for Jake Fromm, who's looking to take the next step with his own play at the quarterback position, having a target like Pickens, how much easier does that make?
When you have a guy, a true number one receiver, it's easier for the other guys to get open, because the true number one receiver is going to garner all the attention. So other guys, now you just have to beat your guy on one-on-one coverage. So it opens up in the run game and the pass game as well.
Do you think there's room for he and Dominic Blaylock both to be playing as a part of this freshman class? Is there room for two receivers here? They're a little different kinds of players, at least in my eye. Is there room for playing time for both Pickens and Blaylock when they arrive this summer?
I think so. I think Pickens can manhandle the outside, and Blaylock can manhandle the inside slide. I think Blaylock is going to get a legit opportunity to fill that void. I like Kyrese Jackson right now, but I think Blaylock is another guy that we need to keep our eye on.
How much is it a challenge not going through spring practice for those two guys?
It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. They'll kind of be behind, per se, but they'll have the whole summer to kind of acclimate themselves to the Georgia way.
And then one more thing on the current roster. If you look around that landscape, is there a guy that you think that maybe not getting enough attention right now that has the chance to potentially break out?
Yes, I do. I think the two big receivers have Bush and Matt Landers is another receiver that I've heard a lot about throughout the whole program, especially from the defensive guys that on the scout team, he's a nightmare matchup for our guys. So if the light bulb goes on for Matt Landers, I think he can really have a really productive season.
In our Facebook comment section, Keith Finley says he thinks that George Pickens is a future first-round type talent in the NFL draft. And I certainly think you see the remnants of that from what we've seen from him in high school, and it sounds like Terrence kind of agrees. Mickey Brady also says that Lawrence Cager, who you mentioned, the Miami transfer, he's going to be a key player for sure. Yeah, he put up better stats than some people probably realize in a Miami uniform a year ago. So that's something to keep in mind when he also arrives here this summer. All right, we've kept you long as part of our DGD video series, but listen, as we mentioned off the top of the program, Terrence is a great wide receivers coach. So in addition to knowing the position, he knows some of the guys because he works with them on an individual basis who will one day fill roster spots at a school like Georgia, maybe some of Georgia's rivals. And so I don't like to let you get out of here without at least talking to you for a little bit about some of these next generation dogs. And one of those guys is in state right now. Georgia commit Justin Robinson. He's from Eagles Landing Christian Academy. And this is a guy, I think there may be a little debate about what position he could play at UGA, but certainly his coaches there at ELCA and our Dog Nature recruiting insider Jeff Sintel say, no, don't get this twisted. This guy is a wide receiver.
Yes,
how much of Robinson have you seen, and what would you tell Georgia fans about this next generation hopeful DGD?
I've seen a lot of Justin because I've been training him since he was in the 8th grade. So I've worked with him consistently throughout these years, and he's a football player. But let's not get it twisted. He's a wide receiver. At 6'5", 210 pounds, he's going to be a matchup problem for a lot of guys, and he has the straight line speed to be a deep threat as well. So Justin is a great addition to this class, and I don't like to put this on a lot of kids, but skill set wise, height wise, body shape wise, he compares to Calvin Johnson coming out of high school. I'm not saying that he's going to be that as Calvin developed, but coming out, he reminds me a lot of Calvin Johnson.
Staying on that subject of 2020 wide receivers, we saw a video the other day of Jermaine Burton, a guy I know you know well. He leaps all the way across the swimming pool, and we joked about this in one of our video shows of, could this video even be real? It looks like something you'd see from like an Avengers movie or something like that. But you work with Burton and have worked with him on an individual basis for quite some time. When we're talking about a lot of these receivers' names, I think you're going to tell us you got to make sure you keep Burton in that conversation because of how he compares to some of the other 2020 receivers. Is that correct?
That's correct. So when that video went out, I texted him. I like, JB, what are you doing? And only you would try it. He say, I tried because I knew I could do it.
Yeah, because you're like me. You're a dad. And so as much as you want to like be amazed at the athleticism, there's a part of you that wants to say, hey, you can't be jumping over a swimming pool like that.
So I was in a group text with his mom and I was like, why? She was like, true. Like, why would you try it? It's like, because I knew I could do it. So this guy's extremely confident in his ability. He's a guy that has the ability to go up and get the balls, as you can see. Straight line speed is there. 6 feet, almost 6'1", almost 200 pounds, and have the ability to track the ball like no other. So he's a guy, if Georgia is lucky enough to get him, I think the Georgia fans would be happy with Justin Robinson and Jermaine Burton as the two receivers in the class.
Let me squeeze in one more name here. Not a receiver by trade, but a guy that certainly catches plenty of passes and does so at an elite clip. That's Reed Gilbert, the tight end from Marietta. We got a chance to see him, at least Dog Nation did. I wasn't personally there, but Dog Nation was on hand for the Atlanta opening regional qualifier on Sunday down in Stockbridge. And, you know, this is a guy that stands head and shoulders over a lot of his competition. He looks to me already like a veteran athlete, like he might as well be being drafted in the NFL, and yet he's only now about to get ready to go into a college. We also saw the tweet that you put out the other day of him wearing the Tennessee shirt, the Georgia shorts. I mean, that emblem of him wearing these multiple logos, it's going to be a contested recruitment for Gilbert. Everybody wants him because of the talent, and I mean, you're kind of right at the center of all that, right?
Yes, he comes to work every weekend, every Monday and Wednesday. He comes to work, and whatever he has on, I always make fun of him. You look at these shorts right here.
Yeah.
This is just him.
Hey, if you're as athletic as this, you wear whatever shorts you want, right? You wear swimming trunks, whatever that is.
Knowing him, he probably left his original shorts and he just put on something. That's just the way he is. I mean, he's a good kid first and foremost, and he's a extremely talented kid. And he's the new age wide tight end that's going to be able to split out and run routes like smaller receivers. So that's the element that he's going to bring. He's going to be able to beat smaller defenders because he's so big. Now he's going to be an outrun linebackers or safeties. So he's just going to be a matchup problem for defenders. And I mean, he has the ability to be big time.
Well, I tell you what, that's great analysis. And if you would like to have an influence on your future wide receivers, tight end in your family, the same way that Terrence is influencing a lot of these guys, I want you to keep this in mind. Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy is a great thing to be a part of. There are guys in the NFL who've worked closely one-on-one with Terrence, guys currently in the Georgia roster who've done the same thing there as well, and a lot of those big future 2020 names as well. At this day and age, if you want to play the sport at the highest level, you've got to have somebody working on technique with you because it's about more than just being a really good athlete. So the email is on your screen.
So the email is wrong here. It's TJ Edwards with the greatest number in the world, number 8.
TJ Edwards 8
at gmail.com.
The greatest number in the world. Listen, you love those one-digit numbers in the backs of these jerseys. Back when you played, you'll only have one.
Yes.
And these days, Georgia's probably got like 9 number 8s now on the roster because everybody wants those single-digit numbers. Back then, it was just you, though, that had that number 8, and it is a great number. So TJ Edwards 8 at gmail.com. You can also reach out on social media as well. That's a great way to get
Yes, it's TE Wide Receiver Academy. You can reach out all social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and reach out to me. If you got a future son that wants to play the position, we can get him some sessions in.
Terrence, I know I speak for all of our audience in the Dog Nation video channel today when I say it has been a great pleasure. Always talking football with you. I love looking back on your career because I have such fond memories of that. I love to get the thoughts from a guy like Terrence on what's currently on the roster and what's coming next. It's always a lot of fun. Hopefully that's what you've come to expect from us in the Dog Nation video channels there as well. Terrence, I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Huge thanks to everybody who put this together for us. And if you'd like to see more of these DGD series in the future with more great former Georgia players reflecting on their memories and their outlook on the current state of the program, make sure you reach out to us here as well. Have a great afternoon, everybody. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily Live. Until then, enjoy your afternoon.